My daughter-in-law mocked me while I was renting. You're going to die poor and alone. When I bought a villa for myself, my son showed up saying, "This is great. My wife will love raising our children here." I smiled and simply made one call. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment from what city you're watching so I know how far it has reached. My name is Clara, and at 66 years old, I thought I had seen every kind of cruelty life could offer. I was wrong. The invitation for Edward's birthday dinner arrived on cream-colored cardstock, the kind Brittany always insisted on for everything. Join us for an intimate family celebration. It read in her perfect, overly manicured script. I should have been suspicious. Nothing Brittany ever organized was truly for the family. I spent the afternoon getting ready, choosing my best dress from the few I kept since Arthur's funeral 3 years ago, the navy blue one with small pearl buttons that he always adored. I even indulged in a trip to the salon downtown to have my silver hair styled. It was a foolish expense, considering my tight budget, but it was my son's 38th birthday. Some occasions deserve the effort. The restaurant Brittany chose was one of those places that screamed money from every corner. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths so starched they could cut paper, and waiters who moved as if they were dancing between tables where a single dinner cost more than my entire month's food budget. I clutched my small handbag tightly as the hostess led me to their table. Edward stood to greet me, and for an instant, I saw flashes of the little boy who used to run into my arms after school. "Happy birthday, my love," I said, hugging him. He felt stiffer than I remembered, colder. Brittany had trained him well. "Thanks for coming, Mom." His smile seemed sincere, but there was something distant in his eyes. Brittany sat next to him, her blonde hair swept into an elaborate updo, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She offered me a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Clara, you look so nice." Presentable. The word hung in the air like a slap. Presentable. Not beautiful, not elegant, not even nice. Presentable. As if I were a charity case, she was graciously allowing to sit at her table. The evening started smoothly enough. Edward talked about his promotion at the law firm. Brittany mentioned their upcoming vacation to Italy, and I listened, nodded at the right moments, trying to contribute when I could. But everything I said seemed to amuse Brittany in a way that tied a knot in my chest. When the waiter brought the wine list, Brittany made a grand show of ordering the most expensive bottle. "We'll have the Chateau Margaux," she announced, then looked at me with feigned concern. "Oh, but maybe we should get something more affordable. I know things have been tight since you moved into that little apartment." My cheeks burned. Yes, I was living in a modest rental now. After Arthur died, the big house felt too empty, too full of memories. But the way she said it made it sound like I was living in squalor. "The wine sounds lovely," I managed to say, my voice firm despite the humiliation rising in my throat. The dinner conversation continued, but I noticed how Brittany steered every topic back to money, success, and how well they were living. When I mentioned that I was volunteering at the community center, she laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, Clara, that's so sweet, playing bingo with the other lonely old ladies. How fulfilling that must be for you." Edward said nothing. He just cut his steak and avoided my eyes. The breaking point came when Brittany got up to use the restroom. I thought maybe I could connect with my son, talk to him like we used to before she came into his life. But when I reached out to touch his hand, he pulled it away. "Mom, about your living situation," he began, his voice awkward. "What about it?" "Well, Brittany and I have been talking. We're worried about you living alone in that neighborhood. Maybe it's time to consider other options." "Other options?" Those words chilled my blood. What kind of options? Before he could answer, Brittany returned to the table with a satisfied smile. "Oh, good. You're talking about Clara's future. I was just telling Edward how worried we are." She leaned forward, her voice syrupy with fake concern. "Honey, you're not getting any younger. You live alone. You're barely scraping by. It's just not sustainable. There are some very nice assisted living facilities that are quite affordable." The room spun. Assisted living. They wanted to put me away. "I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Brittany's laugh was sharp, cutting. "Oh, sweetie, of course you think that. But we have to be realistic. You live in a tiny rental. You probably eat canned soup for dinner. You volunteered just to have somewhere to go during the day. It's frankly quite sad. She picked up her wineglass, taking a slow sip before delivering the final blow. Let's be honest. You're going to die poor and alone anyway. Wouldn't it be better to have a little dignity in your final years? Her words hit me like fists. Die poor and alone. The casual cruelty of it. The way she smiled as she said it, as if she were discussing the weather. I looked at Edward, waiting for him to defend me, to tell his wife she had gone too far. He said nothing. He just stared at his plate, his jaw tight, but his mouth remained closed. Brittany kept talking, as if she was enjoying my silence. We're just thinking of what's best for you. Edward is working so hard, and we're planning to start a family soon. We can't be responsible for you, too. Responsible for me. As if I were a burden they had generously carried, instead of the woman who raised Edward alone after his father abandoned us. The one who worked double shifts to put him through college. The one who celebrated every achievement and comforted him through every failure. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling. "Excuse me," I whispered. I grabbed my purse. "Where are you going?" Brittany called after me. But I didn't answer. I walked through that elegant restaurant on unsteady feet, past tables of families who actually seemed to like each other, past couples holding hands in the candlelight. The hostess smiled at me as I passed. She probably thought I was going to the restroom, but I walked straight out into the cool night air and kept walking until I reached my car. My hands were shaking as I fumbled for my keys. Behind me, I heard the restaurant door open, footsteps on the pavement. "Mom, wait!" Edward's voice called out. I turned, a flicker of hope in my chest. Maybe he was coming to apologize, to tell me Brittany had gone too far. You can't just leave like that. Brittany feels terrible about what she said. I looked at my son, this man I had raised, searching for any sign of the boy who used to stand up to bullies for me at school. Does she really? Of course she does. She was just trying to help. We both are. There it was. Even now, he was taking her side, justifying her cruelty. And in that moment, I understood with painful clarity that I had already lost my son. Brittany had won completely. "Tell her not to worry about me," I said quietly as I got into my car. "I'm going to be just fine." As I drove away, I saw them in the rearview mirror, Edward and Brittany standing together on the sidewalk, probably already discussing how dramatic I was being, how irrational my behavior was. That night, alone in my small apartment, I sat in Arthur's old armchair and cried until I had no tears left. But in the midst of the pain and humiliation, something else began to sprout. Something harder, firmer. They thought they knew me. They thought I was just a sad, poor old woman, dependent on their obligatory charity. They were so wrong. The morning after Edward's birthday dinner, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The tears were gone, replaced by something far more dangerous: resolve. I made my coffee the way Arthur used to, strong and black, and sat at my small kitchen table with a pile of papers I hadn't touched in months. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds documents that told a very different story from the one Brittany thought she knew. Most people would be surprised to learn that the old woman living in a small rental, just scraping by, was worth over $1.8 million. Arthur was a genius with money, you see, not just from the steady income from his engineering job, but from smart investments that grew quietly over the 30 years we were married. Apple stock bought in the 80s. Real estate in neighborhoods everyone said would never amount to anything. A diversified portfolio that weathered every market crash and came out stronger. When he died, he left it all to me. "Take care of yourself, Clara," his letter had said. "You deserve so much more than you've been led to believe." But I had made a conscious choice to live simply. After Edward married Brittany, I watched her turn my sweet, thoughtful son into someone I barely recognized. Someone who valued appearances over substance. What people could give him more than who they were. So, I decided to test them. I moved to a smaller place. I drove an old car. I dressed modestly. I wanted to see what kind of people they were when they thought I had nothing to offer. I hoped I was wrong. I prayed that Edward would invite me over, just to spend time together, that Brittany would show one sincere gesture of kindness, that they would love me for who I was. not what I could give them. Last night, they answered that question with brutal clarity. I spread the papers on my table like a general planning a strategy. The largest investment account showed a balance that would make Brittany's designer dress budget look laughable. There were certificates of deposit, bonds, and 3 rental properties managed by a management company. Edward never knew about that income because I never had to touch it. My cell phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Edward's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again, and again. Finally, I answered. "Hello, Edward. Mom, thank God. I've been calling all morning. Look, about last night. What about it?" His voice was strained, as if he were forcing himself through something unpleasant. "Brittany feels terrible about what she said. She didn't mean it like that." I almost laughed. "Then how did she mean it?" "She was just worried about your future. We both are. Maybe we didn't say it in the best way, but we love you. We love you." The words sounded hollow coming from him now. "I see. So, you'll forgive her? Maybe come for dinner this weekend? Brittany wants to apologize properly." I pictured Brittany rehearsing her apology in the mirror, polishing just the right tone of feigned remorse. "I'll think about it." After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my apartment and thought about the woman I used to be. Before Arthur died, I was confident, social, involved in community boards and charity work. I hosted dinner parties and traveled with friends. But grief had shrunk me. It had made me withdraw. Brittany's cruelty the night before had awakened something I had forgotten I possessed. The strength that saw me through raising Edward alone when his father left us. The determination that helped me build a career when women of my generation were expected to stay home. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, Catherine Pierce. We had worked together when Arthur passed, and she had handled everything related to my finances since. "Clara, so good to hear from you. How are you?" "It's complicated," I said. "I need to make some changes to my will." "Of course. What kind of changes?" I took a deep breath, thinking of Edward's silence the night before. His inability to defend me from his wife's cruelty. I want to remove my son as a beneficiary. Catherine's pause was brief but meaningful. "That's a strong decision. May I ask why?" "Let's just say I discovered some things about his character that concern me." "All right. Who would you like to designate instead?" I'd been thinking about it all morning. There was an organization Arthur and I had supported for years. The Silver Circle Foundation, which provided companionship and support for seniors abandoned by their families. People like the woman I was in danger of becoming. "I want everything to go to the Silver Circle Foundation," I said. "Every penny." "That's very generous, Clara. Are you absolutely sure about this?" "It's not irreversible, but it is a major decision." I thought of Brittany's laugh, of how she dismissed my life as if it were worthless. "I'm sure. I'll draft the documents." "When would you like to come in and sign?" "Today, if possible." After I hung up, I went to my bedroom and opened the closet I'd been ignoring for months. Behind my everyday clothes hung the wardrobe of the woman I used to be. Designer suits from my working days, elegant gowns from charity galas, jewelry Arthur gave me on anniversaries and birthdays. I pulled out a black Chanel suit I had bought years ago and tried it on in front of the mirror. It still fit perfectly. "You've been hiding your light under a bushel," as my grandmother used to say. And for what? To protect the feelings of people who clearly didn't care about mine? That was over. I spent the afternoon at Catherine's office, signing documents that would ensure my money went to people who would truly value it. On the way home, I stopped at the salon where I'd had my hair done the day before. Mrs. Quintero, the stylist Jenna, greeted me with surprise. "Back so soon?" "I want to make a change," I told her. "Something more. Me." 2 hours later, I walked out of the salon with my silver hair cut into a stylish bob that took years off my face. I felt lighter, more like the woman I had been before grief and loneliness convinced me to make myself small. That night, I sat in my living room with a glass of wine. Not the cheap bottle I'd been buying, but one from the collection Arthur and I had started together. I raised my glass to his memory. "You were right, my dear," I said to his photograph on the mantel. "I do deserve better." My phone buzzed with a text from Edward. "Mom, Brittany really wants to make things right. Can you come for dinner on Sunday? She's cooking your favorite pot roast. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I'll be there. But I wouldn't be going as the grateful, diminished woman they expected. I would be going as me, the real Clara, the one with resources, options, and absolutely nothing to lose. They wanted to play with my life? Fine. But they were about to find out they had picked the wrong opponent. As I got ready for bed that night, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back was someone I hadn't seen in years. Confident, determined, ready for whatever came next. Tomorrow, I would start looking for a house, one that matched the woman I truly am, not the facade I had maintained for people who never deserved it. Brittany thought I was going to die poor and alone. She had no idea about the power of a woman who has finally stopped caring what other people think. The house hunt began that Monday morning. I had spent the weekend browsing properties online, but nothing prepared me for the reality of what my money could buy. Mrs. Quintero, my real estate agent, Linda Harris, said as we pulled up to the third property of the day, "I think you're going to love this one." She wasn't wrong. The colonial-style mansion sat on 2 acres of land, with century-old oak trees and meticulously manicured gardens. 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a library with floor-to-ceiling built-in shelves, and a magazine-worthy kitchen. The asking price was $780,000. A fortune to most, but perfectly manageable for me. "It's beautiful," I murmured, running my fingers over the marble countertops in the kitchen. Through the picture window, I could see a garden that would be spectacular in the spring. And beyond that, a small pond with a wooden bridge. The previous owners were an elderly couple who took immaculate care of it, Linda explained. They moved to Florida last month. All the major systems have been updated. And that library, I understand you're an avid reader. I nodded, already picturing myself in that room with leather armchairs and a fireplace, surrounded by books instead of the silence of my small apartment. This was what Arthur would have wanted for me. This was the life I deserved. "I'll take it," I said. Linda blinked. "Don't you want to see the upstairs? Or discuss an offer? We could probably negotiate." "The full price," I interrupted. "Cash sale. How quickly can we close?" Her surprise was almost comical. "Well, with a cash offer, probably within 2 weeks. Are you sure?" "Completely." By Wednesday, the paperwork was in motion. On Friday, I signed the final documents and was handed the keys to my new home. I had never felt so powerful in my life. The moving process was simple. I hired professionals to handle everything while I supervised from my new library, already furnished with a few pieces I'd ordered online. I kept only what truly mattered: the photographs of Arthur, my books, and a few pieces of furniture with sentimental value. Everything else was donated or sold. I waited until I was completely settled before I called Edward. It had been 3 weeks since his birthday dinner, and I hadn't spoken to him since I'd agreed to that Sunday dinner, an invitation I never intended to keep. "Mom, where have you been? We expected you for dinner, and then you just disappeared." Brittany was so worried. I settled into my new leather armchair, looking out at the garden where workers were planting spring bulbs. "I've been busy. Moving. "What do you mean moving? To where?" "I bought a house, Edward. A proper house." The silence on the other end was so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally he spoke, his voice strained and confused. "You bought a house? How? I mean, what kind of house?" "A beautiful colonial on Willow Creek Lane. 6 bedrooms. Lovely gardens. I'm very happy with it." "Willow Creek Lane?" His voice cracked slightly. "Mom, houses there cost more than I thought you. More than you thought I could afford, I suppose." Another long pause. "I don't understand. Where did you get the money?" I could have explained then. I could have told him about the investments, about Arthur's careful planning, about the life insurance and rental properties. Instead, I simply said, "Your father was a very wise man with money. But you said, you were struggling. The small apartment, the tight budget. I chose to live simply, Edward. There's a difference." I could hear muffled voices in the background, Brittany asking what was going on. Then Edward's voice became more formal, more distant. "Well, that's That's great, Mom. Really. We should come see it. You should. This weekend, Saturday afternoon. Okay. After I hung up, I walked through my beautiful new house, imagining the conversation that was undoubtedly happening between Edward and Brittany. I knew their relationship well enough to predict exactly how it would unfold. Saturday arrived with perfect autumn weather. I spent the morning arranging fresh flowers in the foyer and setting out coffee and pastries, even though I suspected this visit wouldn't remain social for long. Edward's BMW pulled into my driveway at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. From the window, I watched them sit in the car for several minutes, Brittany talking animatedly while Edward kept his hands clenched on the steering wheel. Finally, they emerged. Brittany was dressed to impress in a designer cream-colored suit that I recognized as one she wore to make a good impression on wealthy neighbors. She wore the expression she reserved for people she considered important, a bright, calculating smile with eyes that missed no detail. I opened the door before they could ring. Edward, Brittany, welcome. Mom. Edward hugged me, but I could feel the tension in his shoulders. This is... wow, it's incredible. Brittany swept past him, her eyes already scanning everything visible from the entryway. Clara, what a surprise. This is quite substantial. Thank you. Would you like a tour? What followed was 30 minutes of barely disguised appraisal. Brittany admired each room with the trained eye of someone evaluating property, not visiting family. She took note of the square footage, the quality of the finishes, the view from each window. Edward followed silently, his expression growing more troubled with each room we passed. When we reached the master suite, a sprawling room with a sitting area and French doors leading to a private balcony, Brittany finally dropped the facade. This is enormous, she said, stroking the silk curtains. Really, far too big for one person. I like the space, I replied calmly. Oh, of course. But realistically, she turned to me with that sharp smile. I mean, at your age, is it really safe to be rattling around in a house this size? All these stairs? The upkeep? The loneliness? Edward shifted uncomfortably. Brittany, I'm just being practical, honey. Your mother is almost 70. What if she falls? What if something happens? Who would even know? I led them back to the living room, where I had coffee and pastries set out on the antique table I inherited from my grandmother. As we sat, Brittany continued her attack, disguised as concern. The property taxes alone must be staggering, she commented, selecting a scone. And the heating costs, the insurance, the landscaping. It seems like a tremendous burden for someone on a fixed income. I manage just fine, I said, pouring coffee from the silver service that was a wedding gift from Arthur's parents. Brittany exchanged a look with Edward before continuing. Well, that's wonderful, of course. But we've been thinking, haven't we, darling? About our future. We want to start a family. And with Edward's new position at the firm, our current place is getting a bit small. I took a sip of coffee and waited. What Brittany means, Edward interjected, his voice carefully casual, is that this house would be perfect for a growing family. All these spare bedrooms, the big yard for kids to play in. It would be ideal, Brittany agreed, her eyes shining with excitement. And you would have company. You wouldn't be alone anymore. We could take care of you, help with the upkeep and the expenses. The audacity of it took my breath away. They were actually suggesting that I had bought this house for them. That all my planning, my years of financial discipline, my independence, it was all for their benefit. Plus, Brittany added, growing more animated, it would be so much better for the children. This neighborhood, these schools, it's exactly what we want for our family. Edward leaned forward, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the boy I had raised. What do you think, Mom? Wouldn't it be nice to have the family all close? To hear the sound of children's laughter in these rooms? They sat there, both of them, waiting for my answer, so sure that of course I would see the wisdom in their suggestion, that I would be grateful for their generous offer to rescue me from the burden of my beautiful home. I set down my coffee cup very carefully and looked at them, one by one. It's an interesting proposal, I said at last. Brittany's smile widened. I knew you'd understand. It just makes sense. We can work out all the details. Maybe you could keep the master suite, and we'd use the other rooms. The kids would love having Grandma right here. Brittany's already been sketching out ideas for a nursery. Edward added. That sunny room on the second floor would be perfect. I nodded, thoughtfully. You've certainly given this a lot of thought. We just want what's best for everyone, Brittany said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. It's what families do. We take care of each other. Family, that word they had used for years to manipulate me, to make me accept less, expect less, settle for crumbs of affection while I gave everything in return. Then I smiled, a real smile. The first genuine one I had shown in their presence in years. You're absolutely right, Brittany. Families should take care of each other. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked toward the window overlooking the garden. Behind me, I could hear them whispering excitedly, already making plans for their new home. I just need to make a phone call, I said, turning back to them. Will you excuse me for a moment? As I walked toward my study, I heard Brittany's elated whisper to Edward. I told you she'd come around. This is going to be perfect. Perfect? Yes, I thought as I picked up the phone. It was going to be exactly that. I closed the study door behind me and leaned against it for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of excitement from the living room. Brittany's voice carried clearly through the walls as she described her vision for our new home to Edward. Our home. As if she had already moved in, already claimed it as her own. My hands were surprisingly steady as I dialed Catherine's number. Catherine Pierce's office. Nayeli speaking. This is Clara Quintero. I need to speak with Catherine immediately. It's urgent. One moment, please, Mrs. Quintero. The hold music stretched on for what felt like an eternity, punctuated by bursts of laughter from the other room. I could picture Brittany, walking through my things with new eyes, no longer seeing them as mine, but as hers. The crystal vases that were wedding gifts, the paintings Arthur and I collected on our travels, the antique furniture passed down through generations, all of it being mentally redistributed to her taste. Clara? Catherine's voice sounded concerned. Nayeli said it was urgent. Is everything all right? I need to make immediate changes to my will. Today, if possible. What kind of changes? We just updated everything 3 weeks ago. I walked to the window, looking out at the garden where I had planned to spend quiet mornings with my coffee and my books. In the reflection, I saw my own face serene, resolute, finally free of the desperate hope that had kept me clinging to the illusion of family love. I want to add a specific codicil about my house, a very clear one. All right, what did you have in mind? I want it stated, without a shadow of a doubt, that under no circumstances can my son or his wife ever inherit this property. They will never live here. They will never own it. They will never benefit from it in any way. Catherine's pause was longer this time. Clara, that sounds quite a final. May I ask what prompted this? Through the door, I could hear Edward's voice. The master bedroom gets amazing natural light. You would love the walk-in closet, Brittany. They're here now, I said quietly. In my house. Planning how to redecorate it, where to put the kids' rooms, how to help me with the burden of owning it. Catherine's tone shifted to professional concern. Are you feeling pressured? Because if there's any sign of elder abuse or manipulation— No, I interrupted. Nothing like that. They aren't forcing me to do anything. They are just showing me exactly who they are, and I am finally paying attention. What else would you like to put in writing? I thought of Brittany's excited whispers, of the casual way Edward assumed that everything I had worked for was for his benefit. I want the house to go to the Silver Circle Foundation as well, along with everything else. And I want it stipulated that if they ever contest the will, they forfeit any right to even visit the property while it's under the Foundation's care. That is legally sound, Catherine confirmed. Anything else? Yes. I want you to draft a letter, to be delivered to them after my death. Something that explains exactly why these decisions were made. Do you want to dictate it now? I heard Brittany's voice getting closer to the study door. They were coming to find me, likely wondering what was taking so long. Not over the phone. Can you come here? Today? I can be there in an hour. Does that work? Perfect. Use the back entrance. Through the garden gate. I'll be waiting for you on the terrace. After hanging up, I took a moment to compose myself before rejoining my guests. They were standing in the middle of the living room, Brittany with her phone out, apparently taking pictures. Just getting some measurements, she said with that bright smile, to see where the furniture would go. Hope you don't mind. Not at all. I settled back into my chair, noticing they both remained standing, as if sitting would delay their plans. Would you like to see the rest of the house? The basement is finished. It would make a wonderful playroom. Brittany's eyes lit up. Oh, that sounds perfect. And the attic? Mostly used for storage, but it could be converted. An office, perhaps. For the next hour, I played the part they expected of me. The grateful older woman, overwhelmed by her good fortune and their generous offer to share in it. I nodded as Brittany described her decorating ideas. I smiled as Edward pointed out practical improvements they could make. I even offered to show them the property lines so they could plan their garden. They bought all of it. These two people who swore they knew me, who saw my politeness as weakness, my generosity as an obligation, my love as something they could exploit without consequence. We should probably get going, Edward said at last, checking his watch. We have dinner plans with the Cardinas. Of course. I walked them to the door, accepting Brittany's air kisses and Edward's distracted hug. We'll talk more about the arrangement later, Brittany said, already mentally moved into my home. So many details to iron out. But I'm sure we can make it wonderful for everyone. I'm sure we can, I agreed. After their car disappeared down the driveway, I walked through my house with new eyes. Every room they had laid claim to, every space they had already appropriated in their minds, every assumption they made about my gratitude for their intrusion. Catherine arrived exactly an hour later, her leather briefcase in hand and the look of someone ready for difficult conversations. Show me the house, she said without preamble. I want to understand what we're protecting. I showed her the whole place, explaining not just the property, but the scene that had unfolded hours earlier. Catherine listened without a word, taking notes in her neat, orderly script. They really believe you bought this house for them? She asked as we settled in the sunroom with a pot of tea. Completely, I replied. In their minds, everything I do is for their benefit. My financial struggles were just an inconvenience to be managed. My successes are assets they can claim. Catherine opened her briefcase and took out a legal pad. Let's draft that letter. What do you want them to know? I stared out at my garden, remembering the years I had spent trying to earn their affection, their respect, their most basic acknowledgement as a person. I want them to understand that love isn't a one-way street, I said at last. That family isn't about what you can get from someone, but what you give freely. I want them to know that I saw through their performance, that I always knew exactly what they thought of me, and of this house in particular. I want them to understand that this house, my house, will become a haven for seniors, that it will be a place for those whose own children saw them as burdens instead of blessings. Catherine wrote quickly, her pen scratching firmly across the paper. Anything else? I want them to know that I had a choice, I said, that right up until today, I could have decided differently, but they made it impossible. Impossible to love them. And that is not my failure. It is theirs. As Catherine drafted the documents, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. For years, I had blamed myself for the distance between Edward and me. I wondered what I could have done differently, how I could have been a better mother, more deserving of his affection. But today, I saw the truth. It wasn't about what I did or didn't do. It was about who they chose to become. People who only saw others in terms of their usefulness, who confused manipulation with love, who believed they were entitled to whatever they could take. Done, Catherine said, looking up from her papers. How does this sound? She read the letter aloud, and I nodded at every sentence. It was clear, honest, and final. It left no room for misunderstanding. It offered no space for them to rewrite history to their own convenience. Perfect, I said. When can you have the will updated? I'll have everything ready for you to sign on Monday. Are you absolutely sure about this, Clara? Once these documents are signed and notarized, they will be very difficult to change. I thought of Brittany's excited whispers, of the casual way Edward assumed this house was his by right. I thought of the years they treated me like an inconvenience, a burden, a source of guilt and obligation instead of love. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. After Catherine left, I walked through my house one more time. I no longer saw it as the trophy Brittany thought she had won, but as my sanctuary, my choice, my independence made of brick and mortar and rooms full of peace. Tomorrow, Edward would likely call to talk about their move-in date. Brittany would probably already be looking at furniture and making remodeling lists. They would plan their future in my space, with my money, using my generosity against me one last time. They had no idea that with every assumption, with every arrogant expectation, with every time they disregarded my autonomy, they were forfeiting any claim to my affection, my money, or my beautiful house. In 3 days, the new will would be signed. In 3 days, their future would be entirely their own. But without my house, without my money, and without the slightest hope of ever claiming anything. The thought should have made me sad. Instead, as I watched the sunset paint my garden in shades of gold and amber, the only thing I felt was a deep and serene satisfaction. They had made their choice, and now I had made mine. The call came at 7 o'clock in the morning, 3 days after I signed the new will. I was in my kitchen, enjoying my first cup of coffee while watching the little birds gather at the feeder I'd set up by the window. The caller ID showed Edward's number, and something about the urgency of the hour told me this wasn't a social call. "Mom, we need to talk. Right now. No greeting, no pleasantries." His voice had an edge to it I hadn't heard since he was a teenager, and I'd caught him in a lie. "Good morning to you too, Edward. What's so urgent? Don't play dumb. I know what you did." I set my cup down carefully, even as my heart began to race. "What exactly do you think I did?" "The will, Mom. Catherine Pierce's office called yesterday. Something about updated documents and needing to confirm the property address." Catherine had warned me that such calls were standard procedure, but I had hoped we'd have more time before everything came to light. Still, I felt strangely calm as I braced for what came next. "I see. And what did they tell you?" "Nothing directly. But when I pushed them on why they needed our property details, they said it wasn't relevant, since we weren't beneficiaries." "We're not beneficiaries, Mom." The accusation hung between us. I could hear Brittany's voice in the background, sharp and demanding, though I couldn't make out the words. "Do you want to come talk about it?" I asked. "We're on our way." Click. They hung up. I looked around my quiet kitchen, knowing it might be the last moment of peace I'd have for a long time. Then I went upstairs to get properly dressed for the difficult day ahead. They arrived in under 20 minutes, which meant they had been calling from the car. Brittany's face was flushed with rage when I opened the door, and Edward looked like he hadn't slept. "Get inside." "Now," Brittany demanded, pushing past me into the foyer. I followed them into the living room, where they stood like prosecutors about to deliver an indictment. "How could you do this to us?" Brittany's voice was shrill, all pretense of civility gone. "After everything we did for you. After all our plans." "What plans?" I interrupted calmly. "Don't play innocent," Edward snapped. "You led us to believe we were going to live here. You encouraged us to plan the kids' future, our life." I sat in my favorite armchair, the one facing the garden. I did no such thing. I listened while you made assumptions. "Assumptions?" Brittany's laugh was bitter. "You showed us the house as if we already lived here. You talked about the kids' rooms, about having the family close. I was being polite. You were guests in my home." "Guests?" Edward's voice broke. "I'm your son." "Yes, you are. And I am your mother. But that doesn't make my house your house, or my money your money." Brittany began to pace, her designer heels clicking angrily on the hardwood floor. "This is insane. You're almost 70 years old, living alone in a house that's way too big for you. We offered to help, to take care of you, and this is how you repay us?" "She's yelling," she cried, "clinging to this property like it's the only thing you have, lying to us, letting us plan our lives around something you never intended to give us." I looked at Edward, who was staring at the floor, his fists clenched. "Is that how you see it too? That I lied to you?" He looked up, and for an instant, I saw something in his eyes that might have been pain. "Mom, we need this house. My promotion comes with certain expectations, social obligations. And Brittany's pregnant." Pregnant. The word escaped me before I could stop it. Brittany's hand went to her flat stomach, her expression shifting from anger to self-righteousness. 3 months. We were going to tell you when we moved in. Make it a celebration. A grandchild. Another grandchild I would probably never know. Never hold. Never be allowed to love. The thought should have broken my heart. Instead, it hardened my resolve. "Congratulations," I said simply. "Congratulations?" Brittany looked at me, incredulous. "That's it? Your son is having a baby, and all you can say is congratulations? What do you want me to say? That you're sorry? That you're going to fix this? That you're going to put us back in the will, where we belong?" "Where you belong," I repeated. "And where exactly do you think that is?" Edward stepped forward, using the same persuasive tone he used in court. "Mom, let's be reasonable. You don't need a house this size. The upkeep alone must be overwhelming. And with the baby on the way, we really need more space. Then buy a bigger house." "With what money?" Brittany shrieked. "Do you know how much houses in a decent neighborhood cost? Do you know how much private schools cost? Do you know what it takes to give a child the life they deserve?" "The life your child deserves," I corrected. "Your responsibility. Not mine." Brittany's face went white with rage. "You're a selfish, bitter old woman. No wonder your husband left you to raise Edward alone. No wonder your own son can barely stand you." The words hit me like slaps, but I didn't flinch. "Arthur didn't leave me, Brittany. He died. And if Edward can barely stand me, why would you want to live in my house?" "Because it's not your house," she screamed. "Not really. Edward is your only son, your only family. Everything you have should automatically go to him. That's how families work." "Really?" I stood up and walked to the mantel, where a picture of Arthur sat next to photos of Edward as a boy. "Tell me, Brittany, in your family, did your parents work double shifts to pay for your college? Did they give up their own comforts to give you opportunities? That's different. That's what parents are supposed to do. And what are children supposed to do?" She hesitated for a moment, caught off guard by the question. Edward answered for her. "Children are supposed to be grateful. They're supposed to take care of their parents when they get old." "Take care of them," I repeated. "Not take from them. Not treat them like nuisances to be managed or properties to be claimed." "We never treated you like a nuisance," Edward protested. I turned to face him fully. "Really? Then why did Brittany suggest I move into a home? Why did she say I was going to die poor and alone? Why did you stand there in silence while she said it?" His face flushed. "She was just worried about your safety." "No. She was worried about her own convenience. She didn't want to have to deal with an aging mother-in-law who might become a burden." Brittany stopped her pacing and glared at me with pure hatred. "You're twisting everything. We offered to let you stay here, to take care of you. You offered to let me stay in my own house while you took it over. You offered to manage my life because you decided I wasn't capable of doing it myself." "Because you're not," she burst out. "Look at you, living all alone. No friends, no social life. Nothing to do but sit in this huge house and feel sorry for yourself. We were trying to help you by taking it off your hands, by giving your life some purpose, by letting you be part of something bigger than your own pathetic existence." The words hung in the air like poison. Edward looked devastated, as if he were finally hearing what his wife really thought of me. "Brittany," he said quietly, "that's enough." "No, it's not enough." She spun on him. "Your mother is being deliberately cruel. She's punishing us for trying to build a life, for wanting better for our child. She's a jealous, vindictive old woman who can't stand to see anyone else happy." I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder I had prepared that morning. Inside were copies of the new will, along with the letter Catherine had helped me draft. "Since you're so interested in my will," I said, handing the folder to Edward, "you might as well know the whole truth." He opened it with trembling hands, Brittany reading over his shoulder. I watched their faces change as they absorbed the contents from confusion to disbelief, from disbelief to horror, and from horror to rage. "You left everything to a foundation?" Edward's voice was a bare whisper. "To the Silver Circle Foundation? Yes. They help seniors who have been abandoned by their families." "Abandoned?" Brittany's voice was now menacing. "We never abandoned you." "Oh no? When was the last time either of you called just to talk? When was the last time you invited me somewhere without expecting something in return? When was the last time you treated me like someone you loved, and not a chore you resented?" Edward was still staring at the papers. The house, the investments, everything, all of it. Brittany snatched the documents from his hands, scanning them desperately. This can't be legal. You can't just cut out your only son. There are laws. There are laws about elder abuse, I said calmly. There are laws about coercion and manipulation. But there is no law that requires me to leave my money to people who treat me with contempt. We'll contest this, she snarled. We'll fight it in court. I smiled then, the first real smile since they had arrived. Read the last page, Brittany. The part about what happens if you contest the will. Her eyes flew to the document, and I watched the color drain from her face as she read the clause Catherine had insisted on including. If you contest the will, I said, my voice serene, you forfeit any right to even visit this property after it becomes a care facility for abandoned seniors. By law, you will never be able to set foot here again. You can't do this, Edward said, his voice cracking. I'm your son, yes you are, and I am your mother. But being family doesn't entitle you to my life, or my money, or my house. And it certainly doesn't give you the right to treat me like a burden while you wait to inherit my assets. Brittany threw the papers on the floor, her face a mask of fury. You're going to regret this. When you're dying alone in this house, when you have no one to take care of you, you're going to remember this moment, and you're going to wish you had been different. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I didn't see the beautiful, put-together woman who had stolen my son's affection, but a small, greedy person whose entire worth was dependent on what she could get from others. I won't die alone, Brittany. I will be surrounded by people who have learned, as I have, that blood doesn't make a family. Love does, respect does. And you haven't shown me either of those in years. They left then, Edward gathering the scattered papers while Brittany stormed out the door. At the threshold, he turned one last time. Mom, please, there has to be a way to fix this. I looked at my son, at this man I had raised, loved, sacrificed for, and I felt nothing but a deep sadness for what he had become. There was always a way to fix this, Edward. You just never bothered to try. When the door closed behind them, I stood in the foyer, listening to their car start, listening to them drive out of my life for what I knew would be the last time. Then I walked to my kitchen, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and sat down to enjoy the quietest morning I had had in years. 6 months passed before I heard from them again. 6 months of the most serene and fulfilling life I had lived since Arthur died. I threw myself into activities I had forgotten I enjoyed. Hosting book clubs in my library, volunteering at the community center, taking painting classes at the local studio. My house had become what it was always meant to be, a home, not a monument to loneliness. The call came on a spring Tuesday morning. I was in the garden, planting roses I had ordered from a catalog, when the phone rang from inside the house. I almost didn't answer it, but something about the insistent ringing made me wipe my hands on my gardening apron and go inside. Hello, Mom. Edward's voice sounded smaller than I remembered, with a timidity that reminded me of the boy he once was. Hello, Edward. I was wondering if we could talk. In person. I looked out at my garden, at the roses waiting to be planted, at the life I had built without them. About what? About us. About what happened. Brittany and I were having some trouble. Of course they were. I had wondered how long it would take for the cracks to appear once they realized my money wasn't going to be there to solve their problems. I'm sorry to hear that. Can I come over? Just me. Brittany. She doesn't want me to contact you. Despite everything, he was still my son. Despite the pain, the disappointment, some part of me had been waiting for this call. All right. This afternoon. Thank you, Mom. Really, thank you. He arrived at 2 o'clock, driving the same BMW but looking somehow diminished. The confident lawyer who had stood in my living room 6 months ago demanding his inheritance had been replaced by a man who looked tired, uncertain, and older than his 38 years. I met him at the door, noticing how his eyes swept over the changes I had made. The foyer now held a small table with fresh flowers from my garden. The walls were filled with family photos not just of him, but of Arthur's relatives, of friends I had reconnected with, of the women from my book club who had become like daughters to me. The house looks different, he said. It looks lived in, I replied. Would you like some coffee? We sat in the sunroom, the place where I had plotted his disinheritance with Catherine. It was now furnished with comfortable wicker chairs and plants that thrived in the afternoon light. An easel stood in one corner, holding my latest painting, a landscape of the view from my bedroom window. "You're painting again?" he asked, nodding toward the easel. "I've always painted, Edward. I just stopped when I married your father, and then I never found the time to pick it up again." He nodded, staring into his coffee cup. "I remember you used to paint at the kitchen table when I was a kid. You have a good memory." We sat in silence for several minutes. I waited, knowing he had come for a reason, knowing he needed to get there his own way. "Brittany left me," he said at last. "I'm sorry. Are you?" He looked up at me with something that might have been hope. "Because she said you'd be happy. She said you probably planned this whole thing." I set my coffee cup down carefully on the saucer. "I didn't plan the end of your marriage, Edward. I planned to protect myself from people who only saw me as a source of money." "Is that really how you saw us?" The question was so genuine that, for a moment, I saw the son I had raised, the boy who believed the world was fair, that good intentions were always seen. "How else was I supposed to see you? When was the last time you called me just to find out how I was? When was the last time you visited without asking for something?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in a small voice, "I don't remember. Neither do I. But I loved you. I still love you. Do you love me? Or do you love the idea of me, the mother who is always there when you need her, who is expected to sacrifice without question, who should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention you throw her way?" His eyes filled with tears. "That's not... I never thought of it like that." "I know. That's the problem." He leaned forward, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. "Mom, I know I made mistakes. We both did. But I'm here now. I want to fix things." "What is it, exactly, that you want to fix?" "Our relationship. Us. I miss you. Do you miss me? Or do you miss the security of knowing I was there, ready to bail you out when things got tough?" His face flushed. "That's not fair, isn't it? Your wife leaves you, you're probably in a tight spot financially without the inheritance you were expecting, and suddenly you remember you have a mother. And now you want to rebuild. The money doesn't matter. Stop it." My voice was sharper than I intended. "Don't lie to me, Edward. Not anymore. That's over." He slumped back in his chair, defeated. "Okay, yes, things are tough. The divorce is expensive, and we were counting on. We were expecting. You were expecting to inherit my house, live here rent-free, and use my savings as your personal bank account. When you say it like that, it sounds horrible. Because it was horrible. You and Brittany treated me like a resource to be managed, not a person to be loved. But I did love you," he insisted. "I still do." I studied his face, searching for the signs of manipulation I had grown so accustomed to, but I saw something I didn't expect: genuine remorse. "Tell me about the divorce," I said. When she realized the money wasn't coming, she changed. Started talking about finding someone with better prospects, with a family that had more to offer. He laughed bitterly. She said I had disappointed her by not being able to control my own mother. "And the baby?" His face contorted. "She terminated the pregnancy. Said she wasn't going to be tied down to a man who couldn't give her the lifestyle she deserved. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Whatever I thought of Brittany, losing a grandchild I would never know was a pain I hadn't expected. I'm sorry, Edward. That's unforgivable. She said it was your fault. That if you had just given us the house, none of this would have happened. Do you believe that? He was quiet for a long time, staring out at my garden where butterflies fluttered among the flowers. I wanted to believe it. It was easier than accepting that I had married someone who only loved me for what I could give her. Just like you only wanted me for what I could give you. The words hung between us like a bridge. Neither of us knew if we wanted to cross. Edward's shoulders began to shake, and I realized he was crying. Really crying. Not the manufactured tears I'd seen before, but the broken sobs of a man who finally understood what he had lost. I'm sorry, Mom. Forgive me. For everything. For not defending you. For not valuing you. For letting her treat you that way. Forgive me for not being the son you deserved. I watched him cry, this man who had hurt me so deeply, and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't forgiveness. That would take time, if it ever came. But maybe it was the beginning of understanding. "Edward, look at me." He raised his head, his face red and tear-streaked. "I need you to understand something. I didn't change my will to punish you. I changed it to protect myself. I couldn't keep giving pieces of myself to people who saw those pieces as an entitlement instead of a gift. I know. I see that now. Do you really? Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear because you're hoping I'll change my mind about the money?" The question landed like a physical blow. I don't know. I want to say the money doesn't matter, but I can't honestly say that losing it wasn't what brought me here. His honesty surprised me. "At least you're being honest." "I'm trying. I'm trying to figure out how to be the person you raised me to be, and not the person I became." I poured him some more coffee as I thought. "And what does that look like?" "I don't know. Maybe learning to live with less. Figuring out how to be alone without feeling sorry for myself. Calling you just to talk, not because I need something. And if I told you right now that the will is not going to change, that you will never get this house or my money, then what?" He was silent for a very long time. "Then I guess I would have to learn to live with that. And maybe I would ask if I could still come visit sometimes. Not to convince you of anything, but just to spend time with you." "Why?" "Because you're my mother. Because I love you. Even if I haven't shown it the way I should have. Because I don't want to lose you completely." I looked at this man, my son, my greatest pride and my deepest disappointment, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. "The will is not going to change, Edward." His face fell, but he nodded. "I understand. But you can come and visit, if you want to. If you can accept that this relationship has to be different from what it was before. Different how? As equals. With no more expectation that I exist for your convenience. With no more assumption that my love is a given. With no more taking without giving anything in return. I'd like to try. I know it won't be easy. Trust is earned, not inherited. I understand that." I stood up and walked to the window, looking at my rose bushes, which I had finally planted and were beginning to bloom. "There's something else you should know. The Silver Circle Foundation. They have plans to use this house as a residence in a few years, when I'm no longer able to live here alone. And you're okay with that? I'm looking forward to it. I want to be surrounded by people who understand what it's like to be cast aside by family, and who have learned to build true bonds through friendship. Will there be room for family who want to make things right?" I turned back to him, and I no longer saw the arrogant man who demanded his inheritance, but the insecure boy who had once depended on me for everything. "I suppose that will depend on the family, won't it?" He smiled then, a genuine smile that reminded me why I had loved him so fiercely for so many years. "Can I help you in the garden? I remember you used to let me plant things when I was a kid. I'd like to do that again." As we walked out into the yard together, I felt lighter than I had in decades. The money would still go to charity. The house would still become a haven for people like me. But maybe, just maybe, it would also become a place where a mother and son could learn to love each other again, not out of obligation or expectation, but by choice. It was more than I had dared to hope for, and exactly what I had found the courage to demand. A love that was earned, or nothing at all. In the end, I got both. The story we tell is fictional, but it is based on certain real events. The names and places have been changed to protect the identity of those involved. We don't tell this story to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to think. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I am truly curious. If it were you, in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to stay quiet to keep the peace, or would you dare to confront it all to get your voice back? I want to know what you think, because every story is a candle that can light someone else's path. God always blesses, and I firmly believe that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I am leaving you two of the channel's most beloved stories. I assure you they will surprise you. Thank you for staying until here.